Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So as a reminder, these sessions are recorded, and we will start with this session actually publishing these office hours publicly so other folks can use the material asynchronously. I share that just in case everyone is aware so that you don't accidentally share any private information through your questions or if you have a demo, any demo that you share. Okay. I also want to remind folks that if you have any specific questions that you'd like to see answered as part of office hours, or if you have a demo that you'd like to share, we do have a new email alias that I want to go ahead and paste in the chat. It's chat-copilot@microsoft.com. That's where you'll want to send in all those inquiries. Folks have mentioned we still have a few stray links out there with using the old form. If you did use the old form for this particular meeting, unfortunately, I didn't get those responses. So you may have to we'll get to the Q&A bit, raise your hand and ask those questions. And we will slowly but surely update all those links to point to the new email alias. And if in like a week's time, if you still see the old form somewhere, please let us know so that we can get that updated. Okay. So that's the logistics out of the way. So as part of the first 5-10 minutes, I did want to share some updates from the semantic kernel side, just so they have visibility into what we are working on. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. And if anyone has a project that they'd like to demo, we don't have anything slated right now, but I'm always open to see all the cool projects that people are working on. Okay. So in terms of updates from the semantic kernel side, last time we mentioned kind of what our aspirations or goals were for the next 2 to 3 months. Just as a reminder, that was around additional AI connectors, additional memory connectors and improving the ones we have, and agents, making sure that we support agents. Additionally, we also want to make sure that we get parity for both our Python and Java SDKs. Okay. We have updates on each of these different areas. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we blogged about yesterday. I'll go ahead and share my screen. We'll go ahead and go to the blog. You'll notice that we shared kind of what our plan is for v1.0 of Python. We have kind of a tentative timeline that we're working with. Today, the Python library is at 0.4.6. It's kind of a dev state. And what we're hoping is that we can complete all of the major breaking changes that are necessary to get the Python library in parity with the .NET library by this beta release, which we're targeting end of February, beginning of March. Okay. So as part of that, we'll do a lot of the renaming, so finally changing skills to plugins, changing some of the control flow that's improved the experience of the .NET library, like taking SK context and replacing with kernel arguments, and also introducing some of the new abstractions that we've created for the .NET library in order to support multiple modalities, right? So your images, your videos, your audios, your text, etc. Okay. So that's what's coming as part of March. And if you're ever curious what our progress looks like, what we're working on, what's coming next, we did provide a link to our public Python backlog. And anything that we have targeted for the beta release, we've currently marked as urgent. Right, we already started kind of t-shirt sizing these things, so you can kind of see who's working on what and what progress has been made. So if, like I said, if you ever want visibility, this is the place to go to get a live snapshot of what we're working on. After our beta release, what we imagine we'll do next are basically everything else to get it to parity. There might be a few breaking changes, but we want to keep it to a minimum so that folks can start using the beta release. Perhaps most importantly, make the contribution experience to the Python SDK easier. So for some of these things like automatic function calling or kernel hooks or chat roles, we actually believe that some of these features should be easy enough, especially with a sample in .NET for the community to build. So we've started adding tags for anything that we believe it should be easy enough for the community to build with needs help. And if you're interested in contributing to the Python SDK, immediately after this call, we have the Python development sync. Please join that session. We'll go even deeper detail into all of the features that we have planned and how you can best work with us to help contribute back to the Python SDK. Okay. So I'm going to take a pause there and see if there's any questions about the Python roadmap. If you're interested in the Java space, Java has similar timelines to Python, and we will be writing a similar blog post for kind of their roadmap and what their strategy is likely in the next couple of weeks or so. Okay. All righty. So if you see a few questions coming in, none specific to the updates that I just shared, though, so we'll get back to that during the broader Q&A. The other update I want to share is along the lines of those three main pillars that we're working on. The team has started creating ADRs, decision reports, on the kind of plan for a few of these different areas. I'm just going to pull up one just so that you have context, and I'll also go ahead and share it in the chat. It can actually, here we go. You can kind of see what decision drivers that we have, kind of options that we validated. I think in this case, we just came up with one. Our goal as we add additional connectors, both AI and memory connectors, is we'll actually work with you, create a separate feature branch, and allow folks to kind of submit those PRs, add those connectors. The main reason we're going down the feature branch strategy is right now the PRs for new connectors are huge. I think the one for Gemini is over 11,000 lines long, and it's just a bit much for our team to fully review. And so we're actually using the Gemini connector PR as kind of a pilot of this new process. We're creating a new branch for the Gemini connector, and our team is working with that contributor to get it fully baked in. But to me, what's exciting is Gemini will be one of the first new connectors that are coming in the new year. So if any of y'all want to kind of compare and contrast the behavior of OpenAI versus Gemini, it'll soon be very easy to do that inside of Semantic Kernel. Okay. In terms of the memory connector space, we're currently doing an analysis of the connectors that we have right now so that we can do some cleanup. And it's the scariest word to say on a call, but we are looking at deprecating some of the connectors that have very minimal usage or frankly aren't even vector databases, and they were just kind of added in last year. So I'm actually going to open up a poll. I'm kind of curious from this audience, what of, if any, of the memory connectors y'all use today, so that we can make sure those make the cut and we can continue supporting them in 2024. So I'm going to go ahead and create a word cloud and ask what memory services are you using today? Okay. So I'm going to put that in the chat. And as y'all have time, feel free to fill that out. We can take a look at what the responses are later. And then lastly, with agents, We've done some analysis with kind of OpenAI's Assistant SDK. We've been looking at things like AutoGen. We finished kind of that analysis phase, and next sprint, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll actually share a proposal with all of you on kind of what our plans are with agents, so that you can build an agent that isn't necessarily tied to an OpenAI model. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm starting to see some responses come in for the poll. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It looks like Azure AI Search is probably the biggest one. We have a WeV8 that's in there. So great. Those are all some of the top ones. So those are already above our cut line. So we should be good to go there. Alrighty. So those were the updates from the Semantic Kernel team. What I am going to now do is let's go ahead and transition this to the Q&A section. I think there's already like 3 or 4 different questions in the chat right now, so I'm going to go ahead and start reading those off and providing answers to those from the Semantic Kernel side. If you want to come off mute, if you want to share your questions, my ask is go ahead and raise your hand so that we can call on you and we can see your face and you can share your question. Alrighty. Cool. So let's go ahead and get started. So Brett asks, I got a general question I'm hoping that you can help with. What are some best practices when determining how to query data or use enterprise data to generate answers? When should we choose RAG versus other patterns like natural language to SQL? Some questions. I need to know which employee has worked on a particular project. I want to find a company contracts for projects, basically different questions that require kind of the structured information. Great question. So there's a few different ways I would think about this. So there's first the type of data and kind of the best way to retrieve it. A lot of the examples that you provide, it requires relational information. It requires structured data. And if you kind of just shove that into a vector memory store, you probably won't get the best results, right? Like today, we use Google to search the web. We don't use just a plain text search field in order to grab information from a SQL database or from an API, right? So right off the bat, I would say if you're trying to get unstructured data using something like a vector memory store, creating your own effectively pseudo search engine is the way to go. It's frankly kind of the only way to go. But if you already have structured information, if you already have established ways of querying that information, using that data through APIs is probably more preferable. Okay, so hopefully that answers the initial part of your question. There's then the question of like, okay, how if I do have a SQL database or an API, how do I actually query it? How do I actually pull information back? Especially for your questions, you can't just drop in all that context immediately into the prompt because you don't know what query, which API to actually call, right? You need the LLM to dynamically pull that information in, right? That's when you need something like a planner. That's when you need something like automatic function calling. I bring this up because what I've seen probably last year, a lot of projects on what they called natural language to SQL or NL to SQL. And there's kind of some mixed success of folks actually being able to use this for fairly complex databases. Because what it means is you have to semantically describe the entire database to the LLM so that it can successfully make the right queries and join the right tables and what have you. And that can be a lot of information, which means your template, your prompt might be really big, so it might be slow. And that's a lot of semantic information to give to the LLM. So for a 3.5 turbo, it might fall on its face and not be able to successfully write the correct query to answer the question. And so what we have learned on the semantic kernel side is that the more effective way of querying the structured data is not NL to SQL, and instead APIs through automatic function calling, right? With function calling, you're using a native feature built into the model. right? OpenAI has built function calling directly into the model. That means it's better trained, it's going to be more accurate, there's fewer hallucinations, and because you're dealing with APIs, you're just having to describe in your examples the specific bits of information you want the AI to look up. So the projects that an employee has worked on, or look up contracts with this type of filter, right? And that means you're describing less information to the AI. You're not describing whole tables and columns and relationships. You're describing more functional behavior, which is also how we as humans talk, right? We ask each other to accomplish tasks, functional tasks. We don't describe tables to each other. And so that's another reason why these AIs are better handling APIs. So, Brett, as you work on your project, my biggest recommendation is as you kind of look at the questions you want to answer, start figuring out what are those APIs that you want to develop that you can give to OpenAI for function calling, instead of necessarily writing huge NL to SQL prompts that may or may not work and may not be the most performative. Okay. Alrighty, I hope that answered your question. I'm taking a look through here. There's some other comments around this area. Structured data equals NL to SQL, unstructured docs. Yep, you phrased it all. It can be a lot of context. Yep, isn't cheap. The table schema I've got in production, a few hundred. This is from Steve. Is a few hundred lines, not massive, but at the limit of what I could recommend. Yeah, I would say the same thing. Brett asks, so it would make more sense to use an API with an open API spec to wrap the SQL DB than to feed in the whole thing. Yes, that would be what I would recommend. Focus on those APIs. Okay, cool. And I guess since this is kind of related, Blaze asked, okay, if function calling is kind of the end all be all, why the hell did y'all introduce the handlebars planner? The main reason is there's one particular scenario where we found that actually there's a handful where function calling is not the best. One is if you need to show the user what the LLM is about to do beforehand. Function calling is not great because it requires basically automatically calling these functions without much human in the loop happening, right? And so by creating an entire plan with code, with handlebars, you could actually show that to the user, get approval, and then run it. This is more important for kind of destructive or creative operations, less so for RAG, not really necessary for RAG. The other big reason is there are some cases where performance-wise using function calling isn't the best. My go-to example is asking the LLM add all the numbers between 1 and 100, right? With function calling, it actually has to call the LLM 100 times to get all those functions to add everything up, right? And that's really expensive and it's going to be really slow. And with something like a code-based planner, like the handlebars planner, the LM can just write a few lines of code that has a for loop in it that can call that function 100 times, right? We can see that OpenAI kind of doing the same thing, right? They have automatic function calling, but for the assistance API, they also have code interpreter. And the way that works is they ask the LM to write Python instead of handlebars. They write Python and then they execute the Python. So I really do think it depends on the scenario whether or not you want to use something like like automatic function calling, or if you want to ask the LM to write code that you can then execute. Great question. Jose, you have your hand up.
Now I do. And I'll let you see my face because here, yeah, it's good. I know how it feels when you're looking at a blank screen. So I think you missed one of my comments. I put the bulb about what we discussed in Discord, right? So on these handlebars demo that we discussed, it's a bit above. I shared the Discord link, even the GitHub, where I would like your help. but I think it's also blocked because another issue with the handlebars planner with the get helper inside these with or each that is making everything not to work. But definitely, I would like that to work. So for me, doing this is a bit to get and understand and also help everybody else to learn.
So I actually have some really good news on this front. The engineering team kind of did some investigation. Apparently, there's been a fix introduced in v1.1 of Semantic Kernel. Are you on v1.1 yet?
Of
Maybe?
course,
Yes, maybe.
yes.
Okay, so you're not on v1.0.1.
No, 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 no.
You're
Latest
on
and
1.1.
greatest.
Okay, latest and greatest. Okay, so then you might have a new issue then that we'll need to diagnose. Um, but for v1.0.1, yeah, we didn't have the get handler, and so we errored out. It looks like someone added a fix in v1.1 that basically said if we get an error, do some additional logic to look for the property. It sounds like that's not working for your scenario, and I'm actually been looking for scenarios like was this hack the right fix or do we need to do it the right way? So this might be the evidence that I need to kind of go back to the team and see if we need to change our approach. And I'm
Yeah,
just
don't
looking.
ask me. In just going there, the demo I created, which I think it's good. It's composed of two prompts in one. Create 5 different product names, and then iterates on the product names, which generates a JSON, and then iterates even using complex objects. So it shows a
Right.
bit the getter part, and then tries to prepare a proper description for each of them. So it's an example of what you just said, Matthew.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll give this a shot. We've also been looking for more um, tests. So I see you are adding this as a kernel syntax example. Great. That means we can add it as a test. So I want to send this over to
It
we've
is
got
already a test. It
yeah,
is already with
I
the right
know.
format.
I'm like, oh great, it's already a kernel syntax example. So we have zero work to have to do. It will look great. You already have facts. So we have a new engineer that's kind of ramping up in the planner space. And one of their first tasks is just adding more integration tests. I will send this to her. We'll get this merged in, and that's one less thing for her to work on. All
Fantastic.
right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. And I might have her reach directly out to you um, to better diagnose any other challenges that you're running into. Okay. And I guess this goes for everyone. Please, please, please let us know if you run into things with the handlebars planner. I think Blaze already kind of mentioned like why the hell did you build this thing if function calling already exists? We had our reasons, right? But because we're kind of going off the beaten path a bit, um, we are having to do decent amount of work to figure out like what does and does not work. How do we actually optimize the prompt? What needs to be configurable? What doesn't, right? So you're kind of watching us improve this thing out in the open. And the more feedback that you give us, I think we have about a half a dozen to a dozen different issues on the handlebars planner today. The more you can add, the more we can make this thing better before we actually make it a non-preview. Okay, great question. And let's just see if there's any related follow-ups to that. Does the handlebars planner give any advantage to caching? We'll get to that. That's the goal. So that's the other hope is if you have something like the AI create a plan for you in code, instead of like micro functions, but like a whole piece of code, theoretically, you could actually store that inside of a vector DB so that if a user asks a similar question, you don't have to spend tokens creating the whole plane again. You can just pull that piece of code out from your vector DB, run it, execute it, and get that answer to the user. One of the challenges that we have with the handlebars planner, though, is we're currently the planner actually hard codes in all of the values, which makes it difficult for you to make it more dynamic. So, for example, like, oh, create a plan that we'll use one of the previous examples. Give me a plan that gives me all the projects that Matthew worked on in the past, right? Our current planner will say human equals Matthew Bolaños, and then it will run all the APIs to actually pull things. Ideally, what you would want is the plan to be human equals input, which is dynamic, and then it would work for any person in the future. So that is one of the issues that we have filed on the handlebars to make the plans more dynamic so that you could save it into a vector database, cache those plans, and then more quickly respond to other human questions in the future. Great question. Is there any way to change the LLM hyperparameters with the handlebars planner that is directly change it with the planner, not with the prompt functions? This is, I think, either the second or third top item that our new engineer is working on. You're right, it is possible today to use things like the AI service selector and some other kind of hacks to change those top level hyperparameters. It is not easy. And so we'll be adding some additional configuration to both our planners in order to make it easy to configure those things. I know there's one particular issue where folks want to be able to set the temperature to 0. Okay. And then Jose has one more question on the handlebars planner. If we save the plan, this is essentially a handlebars template, right? So we can execute directly with the kernel. That's the plan. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we're kind of doing a bear hug around handlebars right now. Whether or not that's the right decision, we'll see. But the hope is, because this is a templating language that Python supports, Java supports, .NET support, my dream is that you can use, say, the Python SDK. Maybe your research team likes Python. That's all they ever use. They can use it to generate a bunch of plans in handlebars. They can create their prompts in handlebars. They can do everything in handlebars. And then once the app dev team that hates Python, that only uses .NET or Java, once they get involved, there should be a fairly seamless kind of migration of all of these handlebar template assets and files. And because they behave identically in Python and .NET, it should make it easy for these things to move across. Okay. Jose, you have your hand up. Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. Just to follow on that, to see if my understanding is correct. When you generate or execute a handlebars planner, you generate a plan and you have it. Basically, the only difference is it has plan somewhere in the top, right? But the rest is exactly a handlebars template, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
basically, the question there to Tim is, you can take that and execute it with execute prompt async. That's it. And you can put the parameters of what temperature do you want.
So one reason why you wouldn't run, you might not run it with run prompt async is that takes that template and sends it to the LLM so it can do something else with it. If
Yep.
you just want to run the template and just get like the, I don't know, the JSON value or whatever it is, you might not want to send that over to the LLM. But I agree, you could just wrap that up, put it in the prompt async and get a result back.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay. It looks like we have another. I promise I'll get back to the questions at the top, but trying to collapse all these handlebars questions. Before I read the next one, Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah, real quick, along the lines of what Jose mentioned, we were working on that yesterday with Ritvik and Minek, and Ritvik posted his our problem we ran into. Our problem was, so what we're looking at is we ran the handlebars planner, and it produced invalid syntax. And so we thought, well, let's just take, because we have a deterministic call. So we're taking that planner, we're going to basically try to use it and use like basically character replacement and use that as our template for now, and put like $ value. And then their problem is their API call is super complex, and that it's got arrays of arrays. So they've got a parameter that's a filters, and it tries to use array get or a set array and then a JSON, and it blows up there. And we've been trying to figure out syntactically what's going on. We're getting syntax there on the handlebar side. And so I think, I don't know if Rithvik opened up or or posted anything. I'll post something on the Discord channel. They don't have access to it, corporate wise, but I'll post that out there as well. And maybe if Jose and I can maybe work or whatever, but we're hitting that.
Well, and even better, if you don't mind creating an issue.
Okay.
When we first did prototypes of the
Yeah.
handle. Oh, great. When
Go
we
ahead.
first.
Yeah, Matt, I posted the issue.
Great. Perfect.
Fantastic.
Oh, did you create the issue in GitHub? Do you mind sharing the link to that?
Sure.
Thank you.
It was just posted like a half hour ago. But yeah, I can
Okay,
send a link in
perfect.
there.
That's why I was like, I haven't seen it. I don't want it lost, please.
Cool.
Okay, cool. It was just
Awesome.
half an hour ago. When we first created some of our initial prototyping of the handlebars planner, we ran into a lot of these syntax issues. We improved it by improving kind of our sample. But the other thing that we did was use logit bias whenever we sent the request over to like make certain tokens illegal to use. And that greatly improved things. That is not in the current implementation of handlebars. Because we didn't know if it was actually necessary. I think your example is actually demonstrating, hey, we're at the point where we actually need this thing. So thank you. This could be a good justification for getting that working.
Thank you.
Right. Tristan asked, one issue with handlebars is that prompt flow is aligned to Jinja. I have good news for you on that one. I just actually met with some of the folks in the Azure AI Studio space. They have kind of the same kind of dreams where we can have a standardized prompt template that works across languages. The challenge with Jinja is it only works for Python. Jinja's not going anywhere, right? It's kind of the templating language for Python, so PromptFlow will obviously still use it. Our library in Python will probably eventually start using it, but I just wanted to share like there are conversations now on what that standardized template looks like, and I'm doing my darndest to make sure that handlebars wins out. Alrighty. So I'm going to scroll all the way back to the top since I think we hit all of the handlebars questions, just to make sure I didn't lose anyone. Okay. Janice asks, what would the semantic kernel autogen version offer that is not already available with the agent examples? Great question. So, if we take a step back, kind of what is my semantic kernel's plan with agents? So our plan is we're going to build an abstraction for agents that any other SDK or developer could ultimately use, including the .NET version of Autogen. And where I see kind of this layered kind of approach kind of working is semantic kernel. We're going to provide kind of the boring stuff in order for agents to talk to each other, to use plugins, whatever it might be, right? And you should theoretically build anything that Autogen can do on top of semantic kernel, right? But inside of the Autogen library, they've done a good job of adding some helpers, creating things like user proxies, additional abstractions that make it easier for agents to collaborate. And a lot of the research that they're now doing is, are there different collaboration techniques or methods that are more effective than others? So for example, is it more effective if each agent has a turn and they all kind of say something in a big circle, right? Is it more effective to have an agent sitting at the top saying who can talk next? Is it more effective, right? Like you can imagine all these different ways that these agents will collaborate and speak with one another. And in my opinion, there's probably a nearly infinite number of ways. Autogen is going to find what those top ways are, and those will be exposed in their SDK. And as a developer, instead of you kind of figuring out what is the best way for agents to collaborate with one another, instead you would be able to use the Autogen SDK, use one of their established patterns, and life is great for you. but behind the scenes, you would still be using semantic kernel agents, and they would be able to do all of the routing and talking to the models, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Hopefully that helped. Tristan asked, main feedback on memory connectors would be to prioritize PaaS services. Agreed. Yep. That's the plan. We're definitely, we have like two driving factors on how we're prioritizing the health of our connectors. One is, can you like deploy it to Azure? Like, is there a clear Microsoft story so that we can help the Microsoft ecosystem? And then two, Llama Index gave out a really great report of last year and what the top memory connectors are. And there are several that either we don't support or we want to get better. And so those will also be driving our priority so that we can make sure that we're also helping the open source community that may or may not be using Microsoft products. And I'm hoping you see that as well with our AI connectors. The fact that the very first connector that we're prioritizing is Gemini, a Google product, is kind of our way of expressing to the community that we really want this to be a platform for all AI products, whether it's created by Microsoft or not. The only reason we do prioritize Microsoft products is because we know a lot of you out there are using Microsoft products and you're happy with that ecosystem. And one of the value adds of Semantic Kernel is that we play nicely with those products. Okay. Alrighty. Blaze asks, can we use semantic function and function calling using semantic kernel in Python? I'm asking because in one example, we have this info, the joke skill, and the fun skills, function calling disabled. Okay, great question. So one of the work items that's in that urgent bucket that we are trying to get in by end of February is to kind of clean up functions inside of the Python library. As described to me by the Python engineering team, we actually have two completely separate code paths for semantic functions, which, by the way, they've been renamed to prompts in the .NET version, and native functions. And my assumption is that's why prompts aren't working with function calling in the Python space. It does work inside of the .NET space. My assumption is once they kind of merge those code paths and they're actually using the same abstraction for function, it all should actually start working. That is one of our requirements is from a kernel perspective, it shouldn't necessarily know what the difference is between a prompt and a native function. They're just functions. So my guess is it doesn't work today, but it should by the end of March. Okay. Jose asked one more question. When can we expect these agnostic agents? We don't have any firm timelines yet. Like I said, we're currently still kind of in the research mode of what a abstracted agent looks like that isn't tied to the assistance API. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a better idea of what that looks like and kind of timelines for our implementation. Jose, did you have a question or thought? It's just thumbs up. Okay.
No, sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. And I guess one thing I would expect is the abstraction for agents will probably be very simple. It's like, I got a message, and I sent the message back. Probably where it gets complicated when there's multimodal stuff going on. But that probably means that our non-OpenAI implementation of agents can run the gamut of being very simple to having all the bells and whistles of the OpenAI assistants. You can imagine we'll probably start small and then we'll make this thing more capable, or we'll lean on the community to kind of create these agents that are as performant or behave as well as the OpenAI Assistance API. Okay. Robert asks, is there any documentation on how the retry policy and AI service selector interact with errors during auto function invoking? That is a good question. Robert, do you mind, I don't know, coming off mute and sharing a bit more of, I think we have samples of each thing individually, but together, perhaps not so. I'm curious what type of special problems you're expecting as these things kind of get started used to together.
So in the application that I'm working on, we're using our own custom version of it before you guys had implemented that stuff. And we are looking into building out a retry policy for when a function call fails and being able to retry it. And we have it currently where we're swapping endpoints frequently if ones fail. And so we're wondering if there's any custom logic that you guys have that could allow those two to interact so we don't have to have our own.
So I don't think we have custom logic because if we back up, as part of V1, kind of our goal was we're going to lean into dependency injection as much as humanly possible, so that we don't have weird behaviors that are non-idiomatic of the .NET space. I guess folks on the Semantic Kernel team, come off mute if you have a better recommendation. But I guess my expectation is that you would probably use dependency injection to make sure that you can point these retry behaviors to different parts of your application, whether that's the kernel going to these AI services or your plugins going to these different endpoints. I saw Mark come off mute. Do you have any other kind of recommendations?
Yeah, no, I was just going to agree with what you were saying. Like, we deliberately took out we had some bespoke kind of retry handling and resilience kind of like added to Semantic Kernel. We deliberately took it out at the advice from the .NET team. And we're basically just the standard out of the box stuff that you get with .NET will play well with that, right? So that's the position we're in at the moment too.
I guess going back to your original question, I don't think we have specific documentation on how all this stuff kind of starts working together. I can add that to our list of tutorials that we needed to get pumped out. But for your specific scenario, I guess I would expect that you could basically create different named configurations in your dependency injection and make sure that they get funneled to the right parts of your application, whether it's retrying for LLM calls or retrying different endpoints for your functions and plugins.
Okay, thank you.
Jeffrey, turning prototypes from our R&D that only uses Python into C# solution is our exact use case. The more we can use, the better. That is our dream. That is where we want to get to, and that's why getting to V1 in our Python library is so important for us. The dream that we have is for teams like yourself, you can use the same concepts. So everyone says plugins, planners, and personas. Y'all can reuse these asset files across, yeah, it'll be exciting to kind of see that come into reality. Okay, Blaze asks, can you describe a little bit more about automatic function calling and how it differs from normal function calling? It's really how much code do you want to write? So for automatic function calling, what we did is we looked at the OpenAI documentation, and they kind of described how you expect function calling to work, where you send a request with a list of functions. OpenAI says, hey, call this one. You call it, you add it to the history, and then the AI then decides what to do next. With automatic function calling, we basically implemented that to a T, right? So that you don't have to do the hard work of kind of orchestrating that yourself, updating the chat history, and sending all these requests to OpenAI. So it's really just to make your life easier. If, however, for whatever reason, you want to do something that deviates from that path, say, for example, I don't know, you want to inject some weird stuff into the chat history during the invocation of these functions. If that's something that you need to do for whatever reason, a reason currently escapes me. I don't know why you would do this. That's when you would just use normal function calling, and then you could orchestrate it yourself. But I haven't seen a scenario so far where you'd want to kind of not use automatic function calling. Especially since we have hooks inside of semantic kernel, which allows you to kind of observe what functions are being called, and you can abort them if necessary. Jose asked Chris, that's what I saw after 3x with a planner. I took the best and hand edited it. I don't know what that was referring to. But yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I think it's easy. It's about the comment that the handlebars plans were not generated properly, right? So, for example, for doing that demo that I put in my pull request, I asked for inspiration to the planner, and it generated things that were not even building when I was trying to run them.
God. Oh, and then you had a hand fix. I see.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. We will continue trying to make the handlebars planner better. I think the thing I don't know, a couple of months from now, what I'll be excited to try out is maybe even trying fine tuning it. And so part of me is like, oh, if you're already like hand editing and improving responses, how can we start creating like a repo of these samples so that we have a benchmark to actually like fine tune it in the future? Nothing actionable, but
that'd be cool. That'd be really, really cool. Just saying, initially I did not like when you introduced the handlebars planner, but as soon as I started trying that, I say, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. I can optimize things. So it also some function or meta function that optimizes the planner makes a lot of sense.
And within Microsoft, I don't know if y'all seen this. I don't know if you remember. It's something Lingua. I don't know if anyone remembers.
LM Lingua, something like that. Yes. I picked it. I have not dig in too much information.
It's supposed to optimize prompts, and I'm like, oh man, our handlebars prompt needs some optimization. So yeah, we plan on throwing that in there, and fingers crossed, goodness comes out of it.
Don't add too much things. One at a time.
And why not exactly? We definitely have a list of challenges with the handlebars planner that we're burning down, and we'll make better.
To me, what's really important is the agent thing. And also, if you have multiple agents running in parallel, that would be this parallelization. I mean, you posted that in your blog, these micro agent or micro framework or microservice agents.
Yep. And that is possible today with our experimental agents thing today. So if they're expressed as plugin, an agent can go, oh, I want to in parallel.
When can I start trying that? Because when you presented that, you show your repo, and I went and cloned that right away.
Oh, okay. So it's in the real semantic kernel repo now. So let me go ahead and just share my screen real quick. And if we go to our .NET samples, we obviously need to do a better job of documenting these things. But if we go to the bottom here, there's all these samples for agents, and nearly everything in my original kind of prototyping repo has been rebuilt inside of semantic kernel, and we have examples to show for it. So the thing that you're describing with parallelization, I don't know if it actually, actually, there should be like a book example. I think it's this one. Yes, okay, this is it. So you'll want to take a look at this sample. I'll go ahead and paste it in the chat. And the way it works is you can see there's these 3 different agents. There's one that creates an outline. There's a one that performs research. Yeah, okay, the section generator that does research. And then there's one that sits kind of at the top that is actually supposed to create an entire article. And what's nice about this is if you're using a model that has parallel function calling enabled, what it will do is when you ask this agent to create an article, It will first ask the outline generator to create an outline, and then it will parallelly call the section generator. Let's say there's supposed to be like 5 sections. It will call 5 versions of the research generator agent in order to create all of those sections in parallel. So it takes much less time than if you had one agent doing all of this by itself.
Honestly, to do that, I really need the agnostic. So I will probably run out of tokens and of credit in Azure.
Fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. It's coming, it's coming. We'll get it, get it. Okay.
Thanks.
But it does exist. Okay. Anyone from Microsoft Teams on call? Is there plans for native text streaming integration into Teams? I don't think we have anyone on the call. I think I brought it up with them in the past, and I think they said, we know it's a problem. We're kind of working on it. I guess for context, they kind of need it for their own Copilot experiences. The way we have been able to hack it together today is if you are using bot framework, or if you're using even just the APIs for sending new messages into Teams, there's also a method to update a particular message. And so what I've done, which is super hacky, and I don't know if this is ill-advised or advised, is I'll send the first message, which is like generating response or ... And then as I stream results, I just update that message so that it continues to grow and the user can see that information stream in. It is not the most performant thing in the world, and I've had kind of bugs with it because you are sending with each payload like the entire text to Teams to update this message.
That's what I'm doing right now, and it's less than performant of what you'd like. And you have to kind of figure out, well, how much of a chunk to send at a time, because you can't do per chunk, it's too slow. Yeah. So I'm kind of around this like 25 per chunk update message, and yeah, it's okay for now, but yeah, I'd love to see that natively integrated at some point by then.
Me too. So rest assured that at least on the semantic kernel side, we're being pretty vocal about trying to get some of those improvements in.
Thanks.
Cool. Jeffrey says, the way I think about automatic function calling versus regular function calling is that by not using automatic function calling, you have an opportunity to send a message back to the user and confirm that the operation that was selected is the one they want to be executed. Jeffrey, that's right. You could kind of inject additional responses back to the user and say, hey, are you sure you want to do this function? You should also be able to do the same thing with hooks. So we probably need to add some tutorials on our side of how to do that human-in-the-loop approval process with hooks. In fact, actually, that's like number 3 of the tutorials I want to build, because that should kind of give you the best of both worlds, where you can use the automatic code path that we've created and still have that approval process. Tristan Watkin asks, can you disclose if any of the copilots have been built on SK? I'm not going to go super into specifics, but I guess what I would say is most of the brand new copilots that have been coming out over the last, I'd say, couple months or so, those have been built with semantic kernel. Many of the original copilots that shipped like way back in March, so your Teams and Words and PowerPoints, they're not necessarily using semantic kernel today. But there is an effort inside of Microsoft to unify what we call the Copilot stack, so that every team is basically forced to use the same thing. That team is actually composed of about the third of the original semantic kernel team, so that's part of that story. And probably the best example of that so far is the plugin. It's still internal to Microsoft, but the way Bing uses plugins today is actually using the plugin NuGet package within semantic kernel. So yeah, I would say new things as they come in, they're using semantic kernel, and some of the older things we're working on a story to kind of unify their technology stack. Okay. So I want to do a quick time check. We're basically at time. And I think we actually burned through all the questions. So thank you all again for the wonderful questions. This was great. And as a reminder, I'm going to copy and paste this link, this email again. If you have any specific topics that you would like us to deep dive on, if you want to demo something that you've built that you're really proud of, give us an email at chat dash. Oh, shoot, that's the wrong email. I just realized I gave you all the wrong email. So I will get you all the right email this time. Okay. Wow. Matthew, why did you do that? Okay, so this is the right email. I'm going to update up top. Okay, so that no one uses the old one. Oh, goodness. Good thing I checked. Okay, this one makes more sense. skofficehours@microsoft.com. Send us an email there, and we'll make sure to add you to the agenda. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.